Hey everybody, Jake here, and today we're going to take a look at another fountain pen. Today it's going to be the M2 Moonman. This is a very interesting little Chinese pen. You can pick these up off of eBay for relatively cheap, but we'll get into all that in a minute. I will say I was very impressed with this pen. Unlike most Chinese pens, it's not a knockoff, which drew me to it initially, and I'd heard a lot of good stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into some size comparisons, like, neutral, dislike, and then I'll give you guys a writing sample with both of the nibs that come with this pen. Here we have a size comparison. So here's the M2 Moonman, the Delight Smurf, the TWSBI Mini All, and the Lamy 2000. So it's about the same length as the Lamy 2000 when capped, a little bit longer, a decent bit longer than the Delight, and of course longer than the TWSBI Mini. Here's an uncapped size comparison. So you can see it's a little bit longer than the 2000, which isn't really a fair comparison, simply because the 2000 has an extremely short hooded nib. So, it's the longest pen here by a little bit. Now, if you post the TWSBI Mini, it does come out to be a decent bit longer. So that's generally how you would write with that pen anyway. But it's still a decent enough size and comfortable for writing with. And here it is next to a nutty bar wrapper. You can see they probably used a very similar material to get that kind of see-through look. Although this is just a tad bit more durable than the plastic in this one. On to what I like about the pen. So, very first thing is actually going to be the nibs. It does come with two nibs. This one came with a 1.1 millimeter stub. If I can get it to focus here. And a medium nib. I'll give writing samples of both. But these nibs both perform very, very well. The medium is extremely smooth. Gives a fairly consistent line as well. Probably more like between a Western Fine and Western Medium. Similar to like a TWSBI Medium. This 1.1 millimeter stub isn't perfectly smooth, but that's expected. It's a stub nib, but it performs very, very well. Both of these are fantastic, if we're being honest, especially when you consider the price point of these pens. It's astounding. The capacity on this pen is also pretty impressive. It is an eyedropper only, as far as I know, but it holds quite a bit of ink. I've been using this pen for about, a few weeks now. And it hasn't used much of the ink, and it holds a lot of ink. I don't have an exact measurement. I do apologize for that, but it holds a lot. It does come with an eyedropper as well to fill from. We'll go over that in just a bit. But the capacity is very, very nice, especially if you do long form writing or you really don't like refilling your pens. This is a good option. The size of the pen's pretty nice. It's a little smaller than I would like, but it's not too bad. Considering how I hold my pens, it gives a little bit over the end of my hand. I hold them very, very close to the section though. So that could change depending, if you hold your pen way back, this is probably going to be a little too small for you, depending on your hand size. But for me and the way I hold it, it fits pretty well. And I don't hate it. It's a decent sized pen. When capped, it caps very, very deeply. As you can see, there's very little left over. It doesn't have a clip, but it is very pocketable if you decide to carry it that way. The design of the pen is very interesting as well. You get this kind of, this like torpedo shape, which is unique. Not very many pens do this. And I wonder if it's more like a fear thing. Most standard pens are like cigar shaped. This tapers that a lot more and almost seems pointed, but it's a very interesting shape, and I like what they've done here. These kind of parts at the end and in the tip of the cap add some design as well. I really like this one back here. If you tilt it, you can almost get like a pinkish hue going all the way down, but it just adds a really nice point of contrast, I think, and it really distinguishes the pen when you're writing with it. The price on these are very, very nice as well. This pen was under $15. Now, it depends on where you get it from. The only place I know of right off the top of my head is eBay. So I picked this one up from. But they're not bad priced. They're very, very interesting. And if I had had this when I did my top 5 beginner pens, I have no doubt this would have made it onto that list. Not sure exactly where, but it's fantastic. Considering the price and everything that you get with it, it's a really, really good deal. And a lot of pins from China are kind of increasing that value aspect. And I think a lot of pin companies are having to step up their entries into that beginner market to compete. The packaging on this thing is fantastic. So it comes in this little plastic box. You can see here, it's kind of like a frosted thing. You can see it in much better detail in my unboxing of this pin if you want to go check that out. But basically, you get the pin. It sits in there very well. You get a nib here, which has fallen down. It is a medium nib on mine. And then you get this little eyedropper to fill it with. So this is just a little glass eyedropper. And it's nice that they included this with the pen. I do have some blunt syringes for filling pens. But the fact that they include this, especially for a beginner, is very, very nice. The packaging's not bad. It's fairly sturdily built. And you get a bunch of really cool stuff with it. Again, you get that eyedropper, and it's pretty decent quality. You get 2 really good nibs, which is insane. For you to get, a Lamy, say Lamy Safari with 2 nibs, you're looking at about $40. $15 for you to have the chance to try a stub nib and a regular round nib. For a beginner, that's just an insane opportunity at a very, very good price. That's probably what impresses me the most about this pen is they give you those 2 nibs. And when you're starting out, you really don't know. I didn't know much about stub nibs. I just knew about round nibs. So I think if this had been the first pen I ever had, I would have probably bought more stubs by now. But, that's all right. So 2 nibs, eyedropper, decent packaging. Also, one of my commenters asked me to discuss burping with this pen. So again, I've used this pen for a few weeks. I've experienced no issues with burping. I will say I have had burping on one pen before. It was a TWSBI Eco, and the ink was very, very low. Burping generally occurs when you're holding the pen, and your hand causes the air inside to heat up and expand. And when that air expands, it pushes ink out of the nib in a glob. Haven't had that with this pen. I don't know if I just haven't used enough ink or if maybe the plastic on this, which is fairly thick actually, might insulate it well enough to prevent that from happening. But I've had no issues with burping so far at all. On to the neutral. So first up, and I mentioned this in my unboxing, the threads right here where the cap screws on are not nearly as smooth as the threads for the body in the section, which I almost just unscrewed. That would have been terrible. Do not do that when an eyedropper pen is filled with ink. So gladly that moment of stupidity did not play out on camera. That would have been hilarious though. Sorry I prevented you from seeing that. So these threads, I actually think I figured out why. They're kind of, you can see they're frosted. I wonder if they were brushed or rather not polished as well as the rest of the body, which would have made them much, much smoother. Now, they're not terrible. They work. I haven't really had any issues with cross-threading or anything. And since I've been using the pen, uncapping it and capping it back a lot, because I generally, when I'm at work, I unscrew and screw my pens together a lot, whether I'm playing with them or taking them out to jot down a quick note, it happens. So they've smoothed out over time, but I do want to point out when I got the pen, they were not the best, and I still wish they had polished them, kind of like they did on the threads where the body meets the section. This pen scratches very easily as well, which is to be expected of a clear plastic. I will say, compared to, for example, the TWSBI Eco, the plastic is not of the same quality. Now, it feels very, very good, but it scratches much more easily, in my experience. So, I don't know how well these are going to pick up on camera, but there are just a bunch of just tiny little micro scratches all over the pen. Do they bother me? No, not really, but it does happen. Most of mine are on the cap from where because this pen doesn't post very well, get into that in a bit, and doesn't have a clip, I unscrew it and I set the cap down, and then I write with it. Well, that's continuously setting the cap down on my desk or my keyboard or wherever the metal bindings of a notebook, it's become a little scratched up. It's not a huge deal. I just thought it was worth mentioning. Last thing, the flow on these is dry. I prefer wetter flowing nibs. However, the reason this is not in the evil section is because the flow is pretty consistent. Once it gets writing, I've had no issues with the flow. No stops, no hard start. Well, a couple hard starts recently, but in the beginning there were no hard starts. And it just writes very, very well, consistently. And most importantly for a pen, it writes reliably. Alright, on to the section that gets me down votes. So the first thing I dislike, you notice I mentioned in the neutral part that there were some issues with hard starts. This just started happening yesterday. However, it has happened about 5 times, which is a bit much for me. It could be an issue potentially with this nib. I don't know, but I've also been using this nib for about half the time I've had the pen, and I haven't run into any issues with it. But we'll see. But other than that little issue, the nib and flow are pretty good. So, what do I really, really not like? First thing, this name band is not aligned. That is such a nitpick, but it bugs me so much. I wish I could turn it or something, but it just doesn't align straight up with the nib, and it kills me. It needs to be fixed. Okay, sorry. So the section on this is also kind of meh. It reminds me a lot of the Platinum Preppy, where it's kind of cylindrical with no real taper or contour. I don't like these. I vastly prefer contoured sections or sections that taper. Something to help the ergonomics a bit. This is literally like gripping just a cylinder. And I'm not a big fan of it. The pen does not post very deeply. However, it's not backweighted at all when you post it, because of how light it is. My problem with the posting is that you can do this and it does that. So because of the shape of the back of it, it doesn't really have much to post on, and it comes off very easily. Very, very easily. So that's a bit of an issue if you post your pens, or if this pen's too short for you. There's not really going to be something you can remedy by posting the pen. That's about all I dislike about this pen, so that should really say something about the quality and the value here. On to the writing sample. Alright, so here we have the M2 Moonman. If I can see what I'm actually writing. And this is the stub nib. Sorry about the awful handwriting there, a little cramped. So you're gonna get, the broader downstrokes and then much more narrow horizontal strokes, as is typical of a stub nib. This one performs pretty well. As most stub nibs I've tried, it's a little toothy, but it's not unpleasant. Now, reverse writing is awful. You can get more narrow downstrokes and much more narrow side strokes. However, it doesn't feel nearly as pleasant as the top side. Now, for maximum width and maximum narrowness, you'd have to go flat on this side, so up and down, and then upside down, you would do the horizontal strokes. I'm going to give you the maximum line variation, but the reverse writing on this nib is atrocious. It is terrible. That said, it still performs very well as intended. Let's go ahead and swap out nibs here. So in order to swap out the nibs on this pen, you'll just grab and pull and remove the feed and the nib, preferably uninked, by the way. You generally don't want to leave these inked while you do that, or it's going to get messy. I personally don't care at the moment, so I'm just going to do it that way. Okay, and we're already writing. Perfect. So this is the medium nib. And it's a lot more akin to a Western fine than a Western medium, so just keep that in mind. It's not bad though. It's very, very smooth for the size. It's not as smooth as like a Lamy 2000 or a Twisby Broad nib, but for the line width you're getting, it's extremely smooth. Both of these nibs perform very well. The reverse writing on this one is much more tolerable, but it feels brittle, if that makes any sense. It feels like it's going to break if I write with it like that, so I prefer not to, at least with this medium nib. Completely forgot to do a conclusion. Alright, so in conclusion, this is a wonderful pen. It's great if you want to try to get a lot of value for your money, or if it's one of your first pens. As long as you know what you're doing as far as filling it and maintaining it, I think you'll be just fine. This pen performs very well. You do get 2 nibs for the price, which gives you 2 different writing experiences completely. It's not like you're getting, a medium and a fine. You're getting, I believe you get to pick the first nib, and then you get a stub. So it's not a bad deal. It's decently built, good price, writes well. And that's the most important thing about any pen. Alright, thanks for tuning in, guys. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments, and I'll gladly follow up with you. If you like what you saw here, feel free to subscribe. Helps out a lot. And if there's anything else that you'd like to see, go ahead and request that as well. I'll definitely try to do some viewer requests here in the future. Thanks, guys. Bye.